The sound of shattering glass echoed through the empty mansion as Eleanor Blackwood's trembling hand lost its grip on the crystal tumbler. She stared helplessly from her wheelchair at the amber liquid spreading across imported marble, tears welling in her eyes. 38 years old, worth billions, and utterly alone, paralyzed from the waist down after the same private plane crash that had taken her husband's life. What good was all her money when she couldn't even pick up the pieces of her broken glass, or her broken life? If you're enjoying this story of unexpected connection and second chances, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content that reminds us what truly matters in life. Eleanor Blackwood had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. The accident 6 months ago had transformed her from a powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms to a woman who couldn't even command her own legs. The mansion that once hosted lavish parties now felt like a prison, its vastness emphasizing her isolation. "Ms. Blackwood, I quit," said Marjorie, her fifth caretaker in as many months. "Your money isn't worth this." She gestured vaguely at Eleanor, who sat rigid in her custom wheelchair, her once immaculate appearance now disheveled, dark circles under her eyes contrasting sharply with her pale skin. "Fine," Eleanor replied coldly. "The severance will be in your account by morning. Close the door on your way out." When Marjorie left, Eleanor wheeled herself to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manicured gardens. Spring had arrived, but she felt nothing but winter inside. The doctors said she might walk again with years of therapy, but what was the point? Her company board had quietly pushed her into a temporary leave that felt increasingly permanent. Friends had stopped calling after she'd lashed out one too many times. Even her sister had given up after Eleanor had cruelly reminded her of every loan she'd ever given her. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a notification from her security system. Someone was at the gate. Probably another nurse from the agency, ready to quit before they even started. She almost didn't bother checking the camera feed, but habit made her glance at the screen. A young man in a faded delivery uniform stood at her gate, holding a small package. His face was unfamiliar, not one of her usual delivery people. Eleanor pressed the intercom button. "Leave it at the gate." "I'm sorry, ma'am," the man replied, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "This requires a signature." Eleanor sighed heavily. "Fine. Come up to the house." She watched on the security feed as he walked up the long driveway, taking in the grandeur of her estate with wide eyes. When he reached the door, she pressed the button to unlock it remotely. "It's open. I'm in the living room to your right." The man who entered was younger than she expected, perhaps in his late 20s. He had warm brown skin, dark eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners, and a hesitant smile. His uniform was clean but worn, with a name tag that read Mateo. "Ms. Blackwood?" he asked, glancing around the opulent room before his eyes settled on her wheelchair. "Just leave it on the table and I'll sign," she said dismissively. As he approached, his foot caught on the edge of the Persian rug. He stumbled forward, and the package flew from his hands, landing with a soft thud beside the puddle of spilled whiskey and broken glass. "I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, dropping to his knees to retrieve the package. Without thinking, he began picking up the shards of glass with his bare hands. "Don't," Eleanor started to warn, but it was too late. He winced as a piece sliced into his finger. "It's fine," he said quickly, pressing his thumb against the cut. "I should have been more careful." "There's a first aid kit in the kitchen," Eleanor said, surprising herself with the concern in her voice. "Second drawer to the left of the sink." Mateo nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. When he returned, his finger was bandaged, and he carried a broom and dustpan. "You don't need to do that," Eleanor said. "It's my fault," he insisted, carefully sweeping up the glass. "The least I can do is clean it up." As he worked, Eleanor found herself studying him. There was something refreshing about his lack of pretense. He didn't look at her with pity or discomfort like most people did now. "What's in the package?" she asked, more to break the silence than out of genuine curiosity. I don't know, Mateo answered honestly. I just deliver them. When he finished cleaning, he handed her the package and the electronic signature pad. As she signed, she noticed his hands, strong, with calluses and small scars that spoke of hard work. Thank you for the bandage, he said, heading toward the door. He paused, looking back at her. Do you need anything else before I go? The question caught Eleanor off guard. No one had asked her that in a long time without an undercurrent of obligation or resentment. No, she said automatically. Then, surprising herself again, actually, could you reach that book on the shelf? The blue one. Mateo retrieved the book and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed briefly, and Eleanor felt an unexpected jolt, not of attraction, but of simple human connection. Have a good day, Ms. Blackwood, he said with a small smile before leaving. Eleanor sat motionless for several minutes after he left, the package unopened in her lap. Something about the brief interaction had disturbed the stagnant air of her isolation. She opened the package to find a rare first edition she'd ordered months ago, before the accident. She had forgotten all about it. 3 days later, Eleanor was struggling to reach a glass in her kitchen cabinet when the security system alerted her to another visitor. On the screen, she saw Mateo standing at her gate again, this time with a larger package. She buzzed him in without hesitation. Another signature required, she asked when he entered. Yes, ma'am, he replied, setting the box down carefully. How are you today? The simple question shouldn't have affected her, but Eleanor felt her throat tighten. How long had it been since someone had asked that and actually waited for an answer? I've been better, she admitted. I was trying to get a glass, but... She gestured at the cabinet above her reach. Without comment, Mateo walked to the cabinet and took down a glass. Where would you like it? On the counter is fine. Thank you. As he set it down, he noticed the untouched meal tray on the table. Did your cook prepare that? Eleanor gave a bitter laugh. My cook quit 2 weeks ago. That's from a meal delivery service. It's probably cold by now. Mateo frowned slightly. You haven't eaten? I wasn't hungry, she lied. The truth was that she'd been too proud to ask for help with the sealed containers. Mateo hesitated, then spoke carefully. My mother always says an empty stomach makes for an empty heart. Would you mind if I heated this up for you? Eleanor should have been offended by his presumption. Instead, she found herself nodding. As Mateo moved around her kitchen with surprising efficiency, Eleanor watched him curiously. Do you always offer cooking services with your deliveries? He laughed, a warm sound that seemed to brighten the sterile kitchen. No, but I do have experience taking care of people. My mother has rheumatoid arthritis. Bad days, she can barely open a jar. And you take care of her? Eleanor asked. We take care of each other, he corrected, placing the now steaming plate before her. Family is family. Eleanor took a bite of the food, which tasted infinitely better warm. What about your father? A shadow crossed Mateo's face. He died when I was 15. Construction accident. I'm sorry, Eleanor said, and meant it. Mateo shrugged. Life happens. We adapt. His eyes flickered to her wheelchair, then away. Eleanor felt a flash of the familiar anger, but it faded quickly. There was no pity in his gaze, just acknowledgement. I should go, Mateo said, checking his watch. I have more deliveries. Of course, Eleanor replied. Thank you for the help. He smiled. Anytime, Ms. Blackwood. After he left, Eleanor found herself wondering about his life, what it was like to deliver packages all day, to care for a sick mother, to live paycheck to paycheck. It had been so long since she'd thought about anyone but herself. Over the next few weeks, Mateo delivered packages to Eleanor's home with increasing frequency. She suspected that at least some of these deliveries were items she hadn't actually ordered, but she never mentioned it. Each time, he would stay a little longer, helping her reach things, fixing small meals, or just talking. Eleanor learned that Mateo had immigrated from Guatemala as a child, that he worked 3 jobs to support himself and his mother, that he dreamed of opening a small restaurant someday. In turn, she found herself sharing things she hadn't told anyone, her fears about never walking again, her loneliness, her sense of purposelessness. "You know," Mateo said one afternoon as he watered her neglected houseplants, "my mother always says that purpose isn't something you find. It's something you create. Is that so?" Eleanor replied, amused by his penchant for quoting his mother's wisdom. "And how does one create purpose?" "By being useful to others," he said simply. "By making someone's day better." The word stayed with Eleanor long after he left. That night, for the first time since the accident, she opened her laptop and began researching her company's current projects. The next morning, she called her assistant, who was shocked to hear from her, and asked for the files on their latest acquisition. By the time Mateo arrived with his delivery that afternoon, she was deep in spreadsheets. "You look busy," he observed, setting down a package that was clearly just an empty box. "I am," she replied, not looking up. "My board thinks they can sell off our medical research division without my knowledge. They're about to learn otherwise." Mateo smiled. "I'll leave you to it, then." "No," Eleanor said, finally meeting his eyes. "Stay. I could use a sounding board, if you don't mind." "I don't know anything about business," he warned. "That's exactly why I need you. Explain this to me like I'm explaining it to someone who isn't a shark in a designer suit." For the next hour, Eleanor outlined her company structure and the proposed sale, while Mateo asked surprisingly insightful questions. By the end, she had a clear strategy for her return to the boardroom. "Thank you," she said when they finished. "You've been more helpful than you know." Mateo shrugged. "I just listened. Sometimes that's all anyone needs." Eleanor hesitated, then added, "I have a proposition for you." "What kind of proposition?" "I need a personal assistant. Someone I can trust, who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm being unreasonable, and who can help me navigate this house and my life until I'm more mobile." Mateo's eyes widened. "Ms. Blackwood, I don't have any qualifications for that kind of job." "You have exactly the qualifications I need," Eleanor insisted. "Integrity, work ethic, and the ability to see me as a person, not just a wheelchair or a bank account." "What about my other jobs?" "My mother?" "The salary I'm offering would replace all 3 of your current jobs, with benefits. As for your mother, there's a guest house on the property that's sitting empty. She's welcome to move in." Mateo stared at her, clearly overwhelmed. "Why would you do this?" Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "Because you were right. Purpose comes from being useful to others. You've helped me remember that. Now I want to help you." The transition wasn't smooth. Mateo's mother, Sophia, was initially suspicious of Eleanor's motives. Eleanor's board members were shocked by her return and resistant to her authority. Physical therapy was grueling and progress was painfully slow. But day by day, things changed. Sophia, once settled in the guest house, began tending the neglected gardens, bringing them back to life. Mateo proved to be an excellent assistant, organizing Eleanor's schedule, driving her to meetings, and continuing to be the honest voice she needed. Most importantly, Eleanor found herself changing. The bitterness that had consumed her began to recede. She started using her wealth and influence not just to make more money, but to make a difference, funding accessibility initiatives, creating scholarships for immigrants, investing in medical research for spinal injuries. 6 months after Mateo's first delivery, Eleanor sat in her wheelchair on the terrace, watching Sophia teach him some secret family recipe in the outdoor kitchen. The evening was warm, the garden fragrant with flowers, and for the first time since the accident, Eleanor felt at peace. Sophia noticed her watching and waved her over. "Come. You must learn this too." As Mateo helped wheel her to the kitchen, Eleanor reflected on how strange life was. She had lost the ability to walk, but somehow found her way forward. She had lost her husband, but gained a surrogate family. She had lost her independence, but discovered interdependence was more fulfilling. "What are you thinking about?" Mateo asked, noticing her expression. Eleanor smiled. "I was just thinking that sometimes the most valuable deliveries come in unexpected packages." Sophia laughed and pressed a wooden spoon into Eleanor's hand. Less philosophy, more stirring. As the three of them cooked together under the setting sun, Eleanor knew that her life would never be what it was before. It would be something different, something harder in some ways, but richer in others. And for the first time, she was okay with that. 1 year to the day after Mateo first knocked on her door, Eleanor took her first unassisted steps in physical therapy. They were small, painful, and wobbly, but they were steps. When she returned home, Mateo and Sophia were waiting with a small celebration. As Sophia fussed over the food, Mateo handed Eleanor a package. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a framed photograph of the three of them in the garden, laughing together. Below it was inscribed, "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who delivers when you need it most." Eleanor felt tears well in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Mateo squeezed her hand. "We take care of each other. That's what family does." As Sophia called them to the table, Eleanor realized that the paralysis that had once seemed like the end of her life had actually been the beginning of a new one. She had been a billionaire all along, but only now was she truly rich. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more content that celebrates the unexpected connections that change our lives. Remember, sometimes our greatest blessings arrive when we least expect them, perhaps even with a simple knock on the door.